The laughter came first, cruel, elegant, and echoing like the chime of crystal breaking. It rippled through the golden ballroom and left one young woman standing utterly still, her gloved hands trembling against the silk of her gown. Lady Eliza Harcourt, daughter of a forgotten baron, could feel the weight of every gaze upon her. She had not tripped, nor spoken out of turn. Her only sin was existing where beauty and fortune were expected to dance hand in hand. Around her, pearls glittered and fans fluttered, disguising venom as charm. The orchestra continued its cheerful waltz, as though humiliation itself could be drowned by violins. She had never wanted to attend the Queen's midsummer ball. But her mother, determined to mend the family's fading reputation, had insisted. A single dance, Eliza, she had said, tightening the ribbons on her daughter's gown, and all could change. How wrong she had been. Eliza had stood quietly for an hour, offering polite smiles, until one lord, already flushed from champagne, decided to make her the evening's amusement. No suitors for the baron's little sparrow, he had laughed to his companions. Even the footmen look away. The ladies tittered, pretending shock, yet none turned to stop him. And that was when Eliza felt it, the heat of shame, the sting of being visible only as a jest. She lowered her gaze, willing herself invisible. Yet, in that act of retreat, she saw movement across the ballroom, the unmistakable silhouette of the Duke of Ashbourne. Tall, severe, and impossibly composed, he cut through the crowd like a blade of winterlight. The Duke was a figure of whispered fascination, rich, widowed by scandal, and said to possess a heart as cold as the marble halls he ruled. He was the man every mother warned her daughter not to hope for, and every daughter secretly did. And now, inexplicably, his eyes were fixed upon her. Eliza wished he would look away. She did not want to be noticed again, not by him, not by anyone. But the Duke did not look away. He crossed the ballroom slowly, each measured step tightening the air. The laughter around her faltered into uneasy silence. The mocking lord, emboldened by attention, chuckled and turned to the Duke. "Ah, your grace. Tell us, do you approve of such modest fashion? Our little wallflower might start a trend among the servants." The words hung in the air like smoke. The Duke stopped before them, his expression unreadable. The musicians faltered, the violins wailing to a halt. Even the chandeliers seemed to wait. Then he spoke, his voice low but cutting, every syllable honed to precision. "You mistake refinement for rags, my lord," he said. "Perhaps your eyes need better breeding." A murmur swept through the assembly. The offender paled, his laughter dying in his throat. Eliza could hardly breathe. No one, least of all a duke, had ever come to her defense. He turned then, and for the first time she saw him clearly. His eyes were not cold, as society claimed, they were distant, as though haunted by a grief that had never found its rest. "Lady Eliza," he said, and her name, so often whispered as an afterthought, sounded suddenly precious. "May I have this dance?" The ballroom gasped as one. No one refused a duke's request, yet everyone knew he never danced. Not since the night his betrothed had fled with another man, leaving him before the entire court in disgrace. Eliza's heart pounded. She tried to speak, to decline with grace, but her voice failed her. The Duke extended his hand, gloved and steady, waiting. And something within her, something tired of silence, moved her to take it. The music began again, hesitant at first, then swelling into a full waltz. The Duke guided her gently, his touch light but certain. Around them, the crowd watched in stunned fascination. Her steps were cautious, yet his presence steadied her. "You dance as if the floor might give way," he murmured. "Perhaps it already has," she replied softly. A flicker of surprise touched his mouth, a near smile. For a heartbeat, the grand ballroom felt smaller, as though they were alone beneath its glittering dome. As they turned, the mirrors lining the walls caught their reflection, his dark figure, her pale grace, two unlikely souls bound by music and chance. The scandal would be retold 1,000 ways by morning, but for now, only the rhythm mattered. Eliza could feel the tension beneath his restraint, the pulse of a man unaccustomed to vulnerability. She wondered if he pitied her. She wondered, too, why that thought stung. When the waltz ended, silence lingered, fragile as spun glass. The Duke released her hand but did not bow immediately. His gaze lingered, searching her face for something neither could name. Then, with the faintest incline of his head, he stepped back. The spell broke. Applause followed, polite but charged with disbelief. Eliza curtsied, her heart trembling. Around them, whispers began anew, this time sharper, fevered. "The cold Duke dances. With a nobody. Has he lost his senses?" Her mother's eyes, wide with shock, met hers across the room. But beneath that shock, Eliza saw something unexpected, pride. For the first time in her life, she had been seen, not as an obligation or embarrassment, but as someone worth defending. The Duke offered his arm once more to escort her to the edge of the floor. You have given them much to speak of, your grace, she whispered, half fearful, half amused. Then let them speak, he replied, eyes still fixed ahead. Idle tongues are the music of this place. His calm unnerved her. Why me? She asked quietly. You could have silenced him with a word, yet you chose a dance. He paused before answering. Because, he said, words are too easily forgotten. Her breath caught. It was not a compliment, it was something deeper, heavier. Before she could reply, he released her hand and bowed with impeccable form. Good evening, Lady Eliza. Then he was gone, swallowed by the glittering crowd that parted for him as if he were a storm passing through. She stood alone once more, yet everything felt changed. The same chandeliers burned above, the same laughter hummed around her, but her shame had cooled into something unfamiliar, defiance. The whispers that had once wounded her now sounded distant, meaningless. She could still feel the warmth of his hand through her glove, as though proof that she was real in a world that preferred her invisible. As the music shifted to another tune, she turned toward the doors, ready to leave before her courage vanished. But just as she stepped away, a servant brushed past, discreetly placing something into her hand. A single white rose, bound with a silk ribbon. No note, no seal, only the faint scent of rain and ash. The narrator's voice, quiet but certain, closes the moment. That night, the Baron's forgotten daughter left the palace with a flower, and London awoke to its most dangerous whisper, that the cold Duke of Ashbourne had danced, and perhaps, had begun to feel again. The letter arrived 3 days later, sealed with black wax and bearing the crest of Ashbourne. It was not an invitation, nor an apology, it was a summons. Lady Eliza Harcourt read it once, twice, her pulse trembling at each word. Your presence is requested at Ashbourne Hall. I owe you explanation. R. No title. No flourish. Just a stark, commanding hand that left no space for refusal. Her mother, who had spent every morning since the ball boasting of the Duke's attention, clutched her pearls in disbelief. You cannot go, Eliza. Not alone. The world will assume, but Eliza, quietly resolute, had already decided. Whatever his reason, she needed to know why the most guarded man in England had stepped out of silence, for her. The journey was long and shrouded in unease. Carriages rarely ventured into the wild reaches of Ashbourne, where the estate rose from mist and rumor like something half-remembered. By dusk, the gates appeared, ironwork coiled with ivy, rusted by storms. As she entered, the world seemed to dim, as if even daylight held its breath around the Duke's domain. When the carriage stopped before the hall, a tall figure awaited her on the steps. Not the Duke, but his steward, pale and expressionless. His Grace will see you in the West Conservatory, he said. At once. Eliza followed, her shoes whispering over marble that reflected the candlelight like water. Every portrait she passed seemed to watch her, stern and unwelcoming. She wondered if they all disapproved of what she was about to do. The conservatory was vast, filled with cold glass and dying roses. And there, amidst the fading bloom, stood the Duke of Ashbourne. He was not as she remembered him at the ball. The sharp lines of pride were still there, but something in his face had softened, like a fortress cracked by winter. Lady Eliza, he said quietly. You came. I did, she replied. Though I am not sure why. He gave a short, humorless breath. Neither am I. He turned away, staring through the glass to the dark gardens beyond. Do you know what they say of me, Lady Eliza? She hesitated. That you are cold. Proud. Untouchable. He looked back at her then, eyes dark as storm water. They are wrong. I am not untouched, I am ruined by what I once touched. The words struck her like a chill. She wanted to ask more, but something in his face warned her not to. Instead, she spoke softly, then why summon me? He studied her, as though searching for proof of her sincerity. Because you looked at me, he said at last, as though I were not beyond saving. Silence fell, thick, trembling. She could hear the faint crackle of the fire behind them, the rustle of dying leaves against the glass. I did not mean to, she whispered. I know, he said. That is why it mattered. He stepped closer, his presence both commanding and uncertain, as if he were battling something unseen within himself. London has already written its story, he continued. They say I found my new amusement. That I would ruin a lady's name as easily as I ruined my own. I summoned you here so you could see the truth before it poisons you. Eliza's heart tightened. And what truth is that? He exhaled slowly. That I am not a man who should dance with light. The confession hung between them, aching with self-loathing. Yet beneath his restraint, she sensed desperation, not for forgiveness, but for belief. Then why did you, she asked softly. At the ball, why did you choose me? His gaze broke from hers, as though the answer itself might undo him. Because you reminded me of someone I buried, he said. Not in earth, but in memory. The air in the conservatory shifted. Your late fiancé, Eliza murmured. He nodded once. She had your quiet, your grace, and the same courage to face cruelty without returning it. When I saw you mocked, it was as though the past mocked me as well. I could not stand still and watch her ghost be shamed again. Eliza's throat ached with unspoken sympathy. You are haunted, then, she said softly. Yes, he admitted. But it is not her memory that haunts me. It is how easily I have lived without her, until now. The words, fragile and dangerous, settled like dust in the air. Eliza felt her composure tremble. You think I remind you of what you lost, she said. But I am not her. I know, he replied. That is precisely the danger. He turned away, as though the admission itself were unbearable. Outside, thunder murmured in the distance. Go back to London, Lady Eliza, he said at last, his tone formal again. Forget this folly. Let them gossip until they tire. I will not defend myself again. She took a step forward, voice trembling but clear. You summoned me here only to send me away? Yes. Then why do your hands tremble? His eyes snapped to hers, startled, furious, wounded. Because, he said through his teeth, you make me remember I am still human. The silence after that was deafening. The storm outside broke, rain striking the glass with desperate force. And in that sound, something between them shifted, not tenderness, not yet, but recognition. Two wounded dignities facing their own reflection. When she finally spoke, her tone was steady. Then I will not go, she said. Not until I know the man who stood against a room to defend me. The Duke's composure fractured for the briefest moment. He stepped toward her again, stopping only when the space between them was a breath. You do not understand, he said. You think this is a kindness. It is not. To be near me is to be hunted by scandal. To stay is to fall with me. Eliza met his gaze. Perhaps I have already fallen, she said quietly. But at least I chose where. For the first time, his control slipped. His hand lifted, as though to touch her cheek, but stopped short, the gesture caught between impulse and restraint. You are not what they say, he murmured. You are far stronger than any of them could bear to be. Her reply was soft. And you are not as cold as you wish to appear. He almost smiled then, the expression fleeting, half-broken. But before he could answer, the door opened sharply. The steward entered, pale with urgency. Your Grace, he said. Forgive me, but a messenger from the palace. The Queen requests your immediate presence. The Duke stiffened, his mask returning. Tell her I will come at once. As the steward withdrew, Eliza spoke. What does Her Majesty want with you? He hesitated. To remind me, he said darkly, that even a duke does not choose whom he may love. Before she could respond, he bowed, a gesture both farewell and warning, and turned toward the hall. The door closed behind him, leaving Eliza alone among the dying roses. The rain softened, and through the glass, a single petal fell, landing in her open palm. She closed her fingers around it, whispering to herself, then I will choose, even if he cannot. And somewhere beyond the storm, in the echoing corridors of Ashbourne Hall, the Duke's voice murmured to the Queen's messenger, his words faint, but filled with something dangerously human, tell Her Majesty, it may already be too late. The summons came at dawn, sealed with the Queen's golden crest and carried by a messenger who dared not meet anyone's gaze. The Duke of Ashbourne had been called to answer for his defiance. Rumor had already reached London. He had been seen in private with Lady Eliza Harcourt, the Baron's quiet daughter who had turned every whisper in the ballroom into wildfire. By the time the sun touched the spires of Westminster, the story had grown teeth. They said the Duke meant to marry beneath him, to abandon royal expectations for a woman with no title, no dowry, and no fortune except her grace. And worse, that he did not deny it. Eliza learned of his summons from the steward's trembling lips. His Grace left before dawn, my lady, he said. He bade me give you this. A folded note, faintly scented with rain, sealed in plain wax. Do not come to London. Whatever is said, promise me you will not come. The words were sharp with care and cowardice both. She read them again and again until the ink blurred. Then she tore the letter in two and called for a carriage. By noon, the capital was alive with whispers. Carriages lined the palace square, powdered courtiers gathered beneath marble arches, their fans fluttering like restless birds. Inside, the Duke stood before Queen Charlotte herself, his head bowed, his pride stripped bare. The Queen's eyes, cool, intelligent, merciless, held him still. You have been seen, she said, her voice calm as frost. You have chosen folly over duty. I have chosen honesty, he replied. Her gaze sharpened. Honesty does not preserve bloodlines. It destroys them. He met her eyes then, and the force of his defiance startled even the guards at her side. Then let mine end with truth, he said. The Queen regarded him for a long, unbearable moment. You mistake your heart for courage, your Grace, she said softly. You will ruin her. I already have, he answered. By letting you think I could be swayed. The queen's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. Then we shall see which breaks first, your heart or your inheritance. By the time Eliza's carriage reached the palace gates, the guards were already lowering the iron bars. His Grace is not to be disturbed, one said sternly. By order of the crown. She stood there in the rain, trembling, the hem of her gown dark with mud, the ache in her chest a living thing. But she did not leave. Tell him, she whispered, that I will wait. Hours passed. Dusk fell. The city began to hum with anticipation, for gossip, for scandal, for the spectacle of a duke who might defy a queen. Inside, the council chamber was heavy with silence. The queen's advisers murmured of duty, lineage, and political ruin. But beyond their words, beyond reason, the duke's thoughts drifted only to her, the quiet girl who had looked at him as though the past could still be forgiven. At last, he spoke. If I must relinquish my title to keep my word, he said, then I will. The queen's hand stilled upon the table. You would forfeit your birthright for a girl who knows nothing of our world? She knows more than all of us, he said quietly. She knows what it means to be kind. There was a pause, brief, profound. And then the queen, who had outlived love long ago, whispered, then may you remember her kindness when you have nothing left. The council dissolved soon after. The duke emerged into the corridor, his expression unreadable. Servants whispered that he looked both freed and condemned. He crossed the great marble hall, the echo of his footsteps following like judgment. When he reached the doors, a voice called his name. Eliza. She was there, drenched and trembling, her hands clasped in front of her as though holding herself together. For a moment, neither spoke. The world had gone silent, no courtiers, no guards, just two hearts and the echo of defiance. You should not have come, he said softly. You should not have asked me not to, she replied. He almost smiled, almost. If the queen sees you, then let her, she said. Let them all. I have nothing to lose. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost pleading. I have lost everything, Eliza. No, she whispered. You have found something they will never have. He looked at her then, truly looked, and the exhaustion in his eyes softened into something fragile and reverent. Do you understand what you are doing? He asked. Yes, she said. For the first time in my life. Lightning flashed beyond the windows, illuminating them in a brief blaze of white. In that instant, she saw the truth in his face, the pride stripped away, the loneliness, the aching disbelief that anyone could still choose him. Marry me, he said suddenly. Her breath caught. Now? Tonight, he said, his voice trembling with conviction. Before they can take the choice from us. Tears welled in her eyes. They will never forgive you. Then let forgiveness be their burden, he said. Not mine. She hesitated, only for a heartbeat, then reached for his hand. Then yes, she whispered. The chapel within the palace gardens had long been abandoned, its candles melted to stubs, its pews forgotten by fashion and faith alike. Yet that night, beneath the storm's hum and the faint scent of rain-soaked roses, it became sacred again. The old vicar, trembling but resolute, took their vows in secret. His voice was a whisper of history itself. Do you, Richard, Duke of Ashbourne, take this woman? I do. And do you, Lady Eliza Harcourt, take this man? I do. When the vicar's words faded, the storm outside softened, as though the heavens themselves had paused to listen. No applause, no witnesses, no orchestra, only silence, and the fragile promise that two souls could still defy the world. He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. I have been called many things, he murmured. But never husband. She smiled through her tears. Then learn it slowly, she said. With me. They stood there, neither willing to move, knowing that the world beyond that chapel would soon demand its price. But for a moment, time itself seemed to stop, the storm gentled, the candles flickered, and the old walls held their breath. When they stepped outside, dawn was breaking, pale and uncertain. The city still slept, unaware that its greatest scandal had already bloomed in secret. He looked at her, sunlight soft upon her hair, and said quietly, whatever happens, this day is ours. But even as he spoke, a distant bell tolled, sharp, hollow, unrelenting. From the palace tower came the signal that a royal summons had been issued anew. The queen knew. Eliza's hand tightened in his. What will she do? He met her gaze, his expression calm, almost serene. What she must, he said. And so will we. And as the first rays of morning broke over the palace gardens, the Duke of Ashbourne turned toward the sound of the bell, his hand still clasped in hers, ready, at last, to face the world he had defied for love.